Since the Me Too movement began last fall, 7 members of Congress have resigned or retired after sexual harassment allegations. There's near universal agreement that the system for investigating such accusations on Capitol Hill is deeply flawed, yet Congress has not addressed their own rules. Our Lisa Desjardins is here with the story. Lisa.
That's right. Still today, Judy, if you complain of harassment on Capitol Hill, you face a 90-day waiting period and a system that everyone agrees is stacked against the victims. Now, the House passed a bill 3 months ago to change this, overhaul it, but it's been frozen in the Senate. We talked to 3 former staffers who are pushing to change this, among many hundreds who say this is an outrage. Their names are Rebecca Weir, Anna Kane, and also Steele. They haven't done much television. It was Anna's first interview. She's the staffer whose abuse led to the retirement of Congresswoman Elizabeth Esty. They began by telling their story, starting with Steele.
Yeah, so my experience was when I was an 18-year-old intern, and it was my first experience really in a real job. You know, I had heard some rumors about this member who ultimately groped me at the Democratic National Convention in Boston at an evening event. And really the message that was sent to me was that this was the cost of doing business as a young woman in politics. Partly because, as I told people about my experience, I learned that this wasn't a surprise to many people, that this behavior generally and from this particular member was somewhat of an open secret.
You two are nodding. What do you think? Is that similar?
Yeah, I think for me I think the prevalence of harassment on the Hill is definitely very much an open secret. My story, the second year that I worked for Congresswoman Esty, a colleague who I had dated the year before became her chief of staff in 2014. And that began about 14 months of pretty consistent harassment, which was sexual harassment, it was personal and professional beratement, and kind of explosive screaming fits in the office that once included him punching me in the back in the office. And a year after I'd left the office, on May 5th, 2016, he called me 53 times in a matter of just a few hours and threatened to find and kill me. And I think that event was so significant to me because it was quite literally what scared me into both coming forward, but also recognizing the extent to which I was abused in the office throughout the entire second year that I'd worked there.
So when you had a complaint, Anna, did you know where to go right away? What did you do?
I did nothing, both because I was being threatened by my then chief of staff from coming forward. I'd worried about the member that I worked for's career and reelection. You know, we had trainings on things like chemical leaks, but I had never participated in a sexual harassment training, which I think sends a very strong message to staffers about what is important. And what is even worthy of being part of the conversation.
Rebecca?
My own personal experience was with my own member of Congress, a man who I respected. It was the August recess. I had been working on a proposal. I went into his office. I made the proposal. He was open to it, which was great. I was feeling really good about it. And as I got up to leave, he stopped me and said, "My God, Rebecca, you just look amazing today, just really stunning. Would you mind twirling for me?" I was stunned by the request, but I didn't really know what to do. I was young and inexperienced, and I complied. He's my member of Congress, and here he is asking me to do something, and so I did it. Felt awful about it immediately after. Went and sat down at my desk, tried to regroup when I get a phone call from our Washington office saying, "Hey, Gary, my member of Congress, just called and he said you were to have a bonus immediately. Don't know what you did, but congratulations." Of course, I knew exactly what I had done.
You felt like an object.
Totally. I felt like a prostitute. I mean, here I am getting paid, not because of, my professional, accolades or my worth, but because of how I looked and how I made him feel.
Is there a reason you think Congress and the power structure there is different?
I think there's a couple of systemic problems with just how the Hill functions, and as opposed to traditional employers. You have, especially on the House side, where there's turnover every 2 years. Problem number two is that it is so individualized, either by party or by state, region, and so there's not really, again, a comprehensive approach to this.
Each office, each member of Congress is in control of the rules for their office.
Correct. Each member of Congress is really the employer. It's not, you're not working for Congress, you're working for your member.
People come to Washington, D.C. because they want to work on the Hill. You'll work really hard, as we've all mentioned, to get to the next level. So there's a real desire to be there, and I think a willingness to put up with behavior in general that shouldn't be accepted.
How do you take this idea that even after all these conversations, those who are elected to run this country have not been able to change a system that they all admit is flawed in their own offices?
I was really moved by what the House did in January. As a former Hill staffer, I was a little cynical about Congress's ability to quickly get things done, but they did. They responded really quickly to this moment, and with a bill that makes a lot of really important changes. And so it's been dismaying to see it held up in the Senate for so long.
Yeah, I think it's very frustrating that the Senate won't act to pass reform on this issue. I think it's been made very clear that this isn't a Republican or Democratic issue. This isn't a men's issue or a women's issue. I think this isn't a vague or hypothetical issue either. This is a very practical issue that affects day to day the people, the safety and well-being of the people who work for these representatives, and I think they absolutely have a responsibility to act.
There are some people who say this conversation has actually gone too far, and that now things which are very minor are being considered to be harassment. How do you respond to that?
In terms of Congress acting on this legislation, I don't have a concern that it's going too far at all. I think, in fact, it's simply making changes that are long overdue.
I don't think it's gone too far. It's never a bad thing for people to reflect on their own privilege, their own status, their own power, and try and see their interactions through a different lens. And I think all these little things, we're not talking about them individually. You know, an insensitive comment here, you know, whatever, that's not what we're talking about. It's them together, that taken as a whole really, you know, encage us and inhibit us from going forward and finding our full potential. That's what we're talking about.
Are you worried about current staffers on the Hill? Where would you recommend they go to complain? Is it even clear yet that they have a place to go?
Well, I think that that's why it's so important for the Senate to act right now, is that it is unclear what the current environment is for women who experience misconduct on the Hill. And if I were a current staffer on the Hill, I'm not sure that I would know whether reporting was going to come at a risk of retaliation.
Ultimately, this is a conversation that should be had, and I think it should be had out loud. And I think in order for anything to change, either legislatively or culturally, we just need to keep talking about it and having these conversations.
Steele, Anna Kane, Rebecca Weir, thank you very much for talking with us.
Thank you for
having us.